I'm excited because it's that time of year when my girlfriend and I go to Denmark to visit her parents. And I am hoping to use the trip to help me to improve my Danish, both speaking and understanding the language. Now, I have been studying Danish for about 6 months. I made a New Year's resolution this year that I was going to learn Danish. For among other reasons, because her parents don't speak English. So I thought, well, at the very least, I will be able to converse and get a little more intimate with her parents. So I picked up a language app. I've been reading textbooks. I've been listening to stuff on the internet. I've been studying the grammar and so forth. And I'm hoping that while I'm in Denmark, and I will immerse myself then in a way you can't do in the United States, I will improve my Danish, and even more importantly, I will inspire myself to progress with my Danish lessons once I return. Now, I have a few thoughts on how I'm going to use this trip to help my Danish. First of all, or one of them, I will go to a farmer's market and look around and start to chat with people. And I met these two men, and they were very cheerful, and they appreciated that I was cheerful too, and they sold bread mix. And they said, well, do you know Danish? And I thought, well, I knew a little at that point. And what I knew was kind of an interesting thing, because I could say, hi, hvordan garde fin. And then this is the point where you have a conversation, where you bring up some subject that is of mutual interest between two people. And that's what I couldn't do. I could start a conversation, get to the conversation part, but I could never have the conversation. And so then, of course, what was left is going, hi, vi ses. In other words, goodbye, see you later. But I did buy their bread mix, and that was about $7. And so for 10 minutes, I paid 10 minutes a tutorial, was about $7, which is a pretty good deal. Now, another thing I'm going to do is that when I'm riding trains, I'm going to be listening to the train announcements, particularly what's the next stop. Næste stop, Aarhus. Next stop, Aarhus. I don't think the conductor on the train will be too happy if I ask them questions. They may be very good at helping the Danish transit system move with great regularity, but I don't think that they are too keen on helping a foreigner learn Danish. In other words, transportation is their priority. Helping a foreigner learn Danish, not so much. I have other plans. I plan to go to a coffee shop or a bakery or a patisserie, and I will order a coffee and a baked good or some kind of piece of food. En kop kaffe, tak. Yeah, there we go. Har du croissant? Har du roll? Har du healing sandwich? Har du mayonnaise? Har du ketchup? Har du sin mustard? Now, I will probably run out of food items and condiments rather quickly, so I don't think that I'm going to get a great conversation in the coffee shop. I will probably get a very good cup of coffee and something good to eat, so it is not a loss. Another thing I plan to do is I will go to museums. And when I'm at museums, because we're in Denmark and they have both English and Danish labels and legends for all the exhibits, I will read them together, going back and forth between the Danish version and the English version. I'll start with the Danish version and try to figure out, do I know anything here? And then I will go to the English version and say, yes, I do. I figured something out. Now, if I happen to go back to the Danish Design Museum, hopefully I will get to see this exhibition about the bench. A bench. They actually have kind of a artistic, social philosophy about the bench. What the museum says in English, benches are not only found in our private homes and gardens, but also in most public spaces. But I find that a little confusing because that is not a literal translation of the Danish label. A literal translation would sound more like, the bench is not only found in the home and in the garden, but everywhere in the public space. The problem is that these museum translators feel as though they should be contributing to the artistic experience as well. So they don't make a literal translation. They go, well, what would be a better English translation? And yes, if you're not comparing the two, their translation is a lot better. But if you want to use this as an experience to learn Danish, you go, no, wait a second, that word's not in there, and that phrase is not in there. I felt very frustrated. Now, what they should do is they should have a third label. They should have a more literal English translation from Danish, so that someone like me, someone trying to learn Danish, would be able to use this in a much better way than just these double translations they have there. In fact, if there was a museum that had this third label, the more literal Danish, that would help me understand Danish better, I would become a member of this museum, because I like to support the arts, and I like to support museums that support the arts and would help me in my aspiration to learn Danish better. But that's enough with the museum, because I am going to get hands-on experience learning Danish, because I am going to help my girlfriend's father dig out potatoes in his garden. He has even planted extra potatoes so that there will be some potatoes left for me to dig out when we visit. Kartoffel, kartoffel. There's also Gurken or tomato, cucumbers and tomatoes. And not only will I get to say the words, but I'm going to get to eat them too, and they are delicious. Another place that I'm thinking of going to, and this is because Duolingo, the app that I'm using, in order to teach me Danish, has given me some very simple scenarios. And this one, they like to talk about how a horse and an elephant meet. Now that may be a little strange, but that's what they do. So I may have to go to the Copenhagen Zoo and find some guy who knows about horses and knows about elephants. Because what Duo always gets me to do is Hesten møder en elefant. The horse meets an elephant. And then they continue. Hesten og elefanten spiser græs. The horse and the elephant eat grass. Hesten og elefanten drikker vand. They drink water. And then, after a fine meal of grass and water, hesten og elefanten går i rundt om marken. They take a walk around the field, as an elephant and a horse will do after they've had a fine meal. I'm not sure I'm going to find anyone at the zoo who will know both horses and elephants, and I'm not sure anyone's going to be enthralled about hearing about the horse and the elephant and their antics. So I think this will probably be a very limited kind of conversation. But I will say that after talking about it, because I will try to talk about the horse and the elephant having a meal, I'm going to be hungry. So my next stop to get some food and to help my Danish language is to go to the supermarket, where I will find someone who works there and ask them, hvor smør? Where's the butter? Hvor svinkål? Where's the pork? Hvor ost? Hvor uld? Where is the beer? Because after this kind of a conversation, I think I'm going to need a beer. I don't think I'm going to have a very good conversation at the supermarket, though I think I might pick up a little extra Danish, and I will probably be able to say, "Why are you so annoying? Stop it." I know, it's tough to have conversations in Denmark with Danish people. I met an American who worked at a record store, and he had married a Danish woman, and he had learned to speak Danish. And whenever he spoke Danish with someone, they were either a little annoyed or they just said, this guy's not a native Danish speaker. This is his second language. And they started to speak English. They didn't care what the guy wanted to speak. They said, why don't we mangle your language for a change? So, after all this, I think my best bet is to go down to the front desk of one of the hotels that we're going to be staying at, and I will approach the person at the front desk. And when I approach them, they'll say, can I help you? And I say, yes, I'd like a conversation in Danish. Jeg vil gerne have en samtale på dansk. And they go, huh? I go, I want a conversation. I want to speak to you in Danish. And they'll probably look at me quizzically, but maybe they'll say hvad? About what? And I'll look at the guy, and it'll probably be a young person, because that tends to be the people who are there on the late night. And I'm thinking about, well, I've already had my conversation about the horse and the elephant. And I talked about the kartoffel and the agur and the tomato. And I'll think, well, he's kind of a hip guy. So I'll say, kan du lide cinema? And hopefully say, well, I mean, cinema. Everyone loves cinema. And I'll say, hvad din yndlingsfilm? Which I hope says, what is your favorite film? And he could respond to anything. But in my mind, or as my fantasy plays this out, he'll say, Star Wars. And I'll go, Star Wars. Han Solo. Chewbacca. And perhaps we would end up discussing the intricacies of George Lucas's mythic vision for Star Wars. Or perhaps, I mean, at least that's what's going on in my head, and maybe I'm letting my imagination get a little ahead of myself. Because, you know, just like the movies, you know, if this were a movie, if I were in a movie and they would be having an American goes to Denmark to have a conversation, I'd be having these great conversations, and I would go to the person at the desk of the hotel, and we'd be having these great conversations about Denmark, and my Danish would be snapping, and I'd somehow, in the course of a week, become fluent in Danish, and I would become a celebrity, and the Americans would see me as a spokesperson for their country in Denmark, and perhaps I would become, you know, maybe I'd become like the ambassador's assistant for goodwill for America, and the Danish people would like me, and then I would be selling them American products. And, well, you know, it's a movie, and, you know, you should always, you know, shoot for the stars. But here's the thing. If during my 2 weeks in Denmark, I learn a few more phrases, and I become a little more comfortable with the Danish language, so that when I come back, I can learn Danish a little better and be more confident and continue to grow in my Danish language, that will be a bonus, and that is what I'm hoping for. And I hope that will happen to some degree. Thank you kindly.